Hi, I'm Shlomi Ron. I'm the CEO of the Visual Storytelling Institute based here in Miami, Florida. And welcome to another episode of the Visual Storytelling Today podcast. And today I wanted to talk to a great guest that is actually, since in my previous podcast I was talking about visual stories in the context of the coronavirus, I wanted to kind of take today a different angle and really focus on underrepresented voices that typically we tend to forget in normal times, and especially these days, you know, with the coronavirus is outside raging. And I figured I'd like to cover that angle and bring up a guest that's actually driving this on the forefront. So I'm very excited to have Chris Colbert. He is the founder and CEO at the DCP Entertainment. A little bit about Chris. He has a passion for connecting audiences with innovative and inspiring content. Chris Colbert founded DCP Entertainment, giving platform for people of color, women, and LGBTQ communities, as well as highlighting stories around mental health, disability, and overcoming diversity. DCP present stories that we can all relate through audio and visual storytelling. So since we are all about visual storytelling, I figured he's going to be the perfect guest to cover that angle. So welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me to talk about this topic.
Excellent. So before we get started deep about how stories of underrepresented voices drive social impact, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your backstory, how you got started, and.
Yeah, so how I got started actually even begins just kind of as me as a young child growing up in the suburbs of Maryland, suburbs of Baltimore City, in a county called Harford County, in a town called Bel Air, Maryland, which unfortunately you may have seen in the Netflix show Dope, because unfortunately the opioid epidemic has really hit hard there.
Right.
But when I was there, it was very much a quiet suburb, predominantly white, even especially when I went to a private high school where I was one of, say, about 5, actually maybe even less, Black students within my 200-person graduating class. And so growing up in that kind of area, but also spending my summers in Baltimore City, and spending my summers in the Black church, I grew up with this dichotomy of race and my identity as my neighborhood. And so you have this, and I know this is a struggle for many people, it's this understanding of who are you? And for me, that struggle was based around race predominantly. And I bring this all up to say, I think all of us are shaped by our traumas growing up, whether we realize it or not. And one of my major traumas was growing up in an area that, unfortunately, this area of Maryland is very, there's a lot of racist components to it. The town just next to us is a town where it's openly known that there are KKK rallies.
Oh, wow.
And there are, vandalism type things with the N-word being written places or death threats that people would receive. And so, that's kind of the area that I grew up in. Meanwhile, still struggling with who am I, because I felt too white for the Black people that I'd hang out with in Baltimore City, but I felt too Black for the white people I was hanging out with in Harford County, Maryland. And so I bring this up as well to say that this is really what shaped my career trajectory.
And do you remember any kind of a particular moment that kind of like every good story has this inciting incident that kind of almost this like lightning moment that drove you to decide I'm going to pursue this initiative?
There's a lot of them. I think it's definitely a culmination of a few different events. I know one that always stands out to me because it almost just feels like watching a TV show. I remember there was this friend of mine, white guy, very nice. I'd never had any issues around race or anything. And I remember playing at his house. This is in like junior year of high school, maybe even senior year of high school. So I'm like 16 to 18, somewhere in that range. And I remember playing with him. He's got like these 2 adopted Asian sisters, and everything was great. And I remember leaving, and he ran out to say bye to me as I'm getting in my car. And he goes, "Man, this was really great. My parents loved you, and they don't even like Black people."
Oh, wow.
And he said it so matter-of-factly. It wasn't even just what he said, it was how he said it and how that was just so normal and like a compliment to me. Yeah, and so that's just a minor kind of thing. Because again, there was really racist things in terms of I remember coming home when I was in the 4th grade, and there's a letter in the mail that says "nigger go home," or I don't know if you can say things like that here. So N-word go home.
Yeah.
And I knew that there was a skinhead that lived behind my house, and so having the fear of, oh, was it that skinhead? Do I have to be concerned going out during the day or at night? So yeah, when you add those things up, but yeah, to even have a friend who means well, but he thought that was just this amazing thing to tell me, made me realize some of the, and I use this term loosely, the ignorance that is there. And I use it loosely because I don't like to villainize people for being ignorant. I think some people do choose to be ignorant, and there is some, that's problematic, but there are some. Yes, exactly. There's something where it's not intentional. And so I think that's an education piece. And so in how that shapes who I am now and what I'm doing with this company, based upon my own experiences, based upon this lack of education for my own people, but also for the people that surround us, whether it be white or Asian or Latino or what have you, to understand each other's experiences from a very real and authentic space. And so creating my company, I created this company, DCP Entertainment, as a voice for underrepresented people, one with the mission of giving people like me representation in the kind of content that we're seeing, and speaking true to the kind of experiences that we have, and not this, oh, we're perceiving this other community as being X, Y, and Z. No, these are actual human beings living these experiences, talking about their experiences. And then for the outsider to hear directly from those communities and understand as much as they can, because you truly only know experiences when you live through them, but to the extent that we can lay them out in our audio, in our video content, I feel like that's kind of my mission, is to help to educate people who are going through these struggles and who are adjacent to these struggles and can, be allies within what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and I think, the authenticity that comes out of it is that it's not really communicated through another media outlet that have maybe a different agenda. That's another great benefit for this platform, because it's coming directly from the source. And that's something that when I did research for this show, I saw it in several of your programs. Can you talk a little bit about what visual stories DCP Entertainment is producing these days?
So the type of stories that we produce, I like to, I put them underneath this umbrella that you had mentioned a second ago, of underrepresented communities and underrepresented conversations. So communities are, kind of more in your face, of people of color. And I mean, beyond just Black people, especially Latino, especially now going through coronavirus, we're looking at the Asian, folks who are being villainized and aren't being able to fully control their narrative. Yeah. Oh, extremely. I think, also women, LGBTQ plus communities, as you mentioned, people with disability. I think we forget sometimes that people who are disabled are our largest minority community, or our largest underserved community in the world.
Right.
And actually, that's something I had to kind of learn as well as we produced one of our programs that I'll touch on in a little bit.
Yeah.
But also then underrepresented conversations, which I like to think of as conversations on mental health, conversations on overcoming adversity. And so all those fall underneath the umbrella of what I see the current media landscape not hitting on, or not being given the proper resources to. So it's one thing to have a company give a show to a woman, but it's a completely another thing just knowing it from the inside out, in terms of being behind the scenes. It's another thing that bring that show on and give it the same level of talent booking, give it the same level of marketing and press that you would any other cis white male gendered hosted show. Because what I've seen is when those resources are not given, then the executives say, well, look at this woman-led show and look at this male hosted show. And look, I told you the woman hosted show wasn't going to work. Right. But really, you just never gave it the proper resources to see if it could succeed. So that's kind of where we come in as a company. Specifically with our exact content, most of our content at the moment falls underneath the umbrella of Black people of color, given the fact that that is my own personal experience and it's the one that I can help tell from a very real place. And I have the connections that allow me to bring in the speakers who can speak even better than I can about those kind of things. So people like Torre, Danielle Moody, Mark Thompson, people who are regulars on MSNBC talking to these kind of issues.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, but then we also have things outside that box,
Mm-hmm.
like Paralympian Lacey Henderson. She was training for the 2020 Paralympic Games, which is now the 2021 Paralympic Games. But she's a host that we partnered with on the show Pick Last and Gym Class, where she's able to not only speak about her, disability and overcoming this adversity, but it also is a great show of representation, of having a video series where sometimes you might not even notice that she actually has an amputated leg, because her prosthetic looks so good that sometimes you just get lost in the fact that she's just a great interviewer and just doing a great interview-based show. And I think it's important to have that representation for other people who are disabled to see, oh, wow, I can be an interviewer, or I can be X, Y, and Z, and not necessarily have to say, hey, look at me, I'm disabled. It really can just be based on your talent.
No, absolutely. I so agree with that, because when you watch TV these days in the mainstream media, you definitely don't see people that look like you for most people, right? So it's kind of always slanted towards one specific population segment. So it's definitely, what you do, kind of representing the marginalized voices is really important. One of the things that I always ask my guests, and I'm kind of curious with your answer, is how would you define visual storytelling? Because, and I tell you why I'm asking this, because when I started the Visual Storytelling Institute, the term was primarily referred to as graphic design, photography, or filmmaking. What I'm trying to do is bring it into the context of marketing. So I'm kind of curious, what do you see, how do you define visual storytelling from your perspective?
Yeah, I see visual storytelling as using images, and let's be honest, we're not, talking about the silent film era, so audio as well. Using images and audio to connect with an audience and connect with them on an emotional level. I think that's great visual storytelling, or even audio storytelling. I think it's when you're able to connect with your intended audience on an emotional level and take them on the journey with you, or take them on the journey that you want them to go along, especially if you're talking about from a marketing perspective, a journey that's going to then lead them to your product.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's the emotional piece is what I really like to hone in on. If you're able to convey emotion, that's how we start to affect people's habits. That's how we start to really make them feel like their needs are being reflected in your content.
And speaking about emotion, because I'm really a great fan about focusing on emotions, do you do any kind of a pre-research for your shows with the audience in terms of kind of understanding, what are their pain points, what emotions they carry, in order to kind of reflect them back in your visual stories?
Yeah, so not in a formalized method yet. It's something that I do want to do. It's actually why we're building up our email subscription list. So we have that resource to be able to reach out to people and say, hey, what are your lived experiences? What are you having anxieties about? But in an informal way, that is what we do, or what I do. And I encourage our producers to do when they work on these projects is, I get most of my ideas and what I, want to bring into the company based on my own personal experiences, but then also I compare them on the other lived experiences of those around me. So I'm one of those people where if you run into me at the bar, I'm probably going to talk to you. Like, we're going to be best friends by the end of that day, even though we just met. And so like I have these deep conversations with strangers on a regular basis, whether it be playing sports, out at the restaurant, out at a bar, out at a park. And so by having these conversations, you don't necessarily have to ask them, hey, what do you want out of a podcast, or what do you want out of your video series? No, you just talk about life and you find out what comes up organically. What are the things that they sound anxious about? And so, okay, maybe this is a place that we can educate or, help to provide resources for something that people are going through. If, people are bringing up that so many people in their family have schizophrenia or depression or something like that, and I hear this on a regular basis, oh wow, this is a bigger issue in America that maybe isn't getting talked about. We're having these conversations amongst ourselves, but how can we now as a company bring these to the forefront? So I think, we're doing it in an informal way right now, but down the line, we do need to get into a more formal way of doing it, because right now it's very, though I travel a lot, it's still very regional, these conversations I'm having. I'm based in the Northeast, and we want to be very respectful of the fact that there are concerns in the Midwest or in the South or on the West Coast that may be different than, these people here in the Northeast corridor.
Got it. So that's Interesting. So when you come up with a new concept for a show, maybe if you can describe maybe the end-to-end process, how you typically come up with a concept for the show, and then once the show is up and running, what is the content strategy to come up with new topics for the show?
Yeah, so when we first develop a show, we do challenge let me back up a little bit further. Well, most of the shows that we do are usually a partnership between us and a host or us and a brand. So usually that host or brand is coming in with an idea of what they want to do. There are a few times where we come up with the idea and we say, hey, you're going to be a great host for this. But I'll speak more to what's kind of normal for us, which is we partner with the host. They tell us what idea they want to do. And we say, all right, map out, as you were just kind of saying, what are, topics? What are the topics that we're going to touch on? List out 20 of them. So we know, okay, we at least have a base to start from. Once we have all that together, we decide, okay, what are the resources that need to go behind this? How many producers? How much, what's the production time going to be? What's our production schedule going to be? All those kind of nuts and bolts of talent booking, all that. Once we get...
Side question, you mentioned brands. Are you referring to real the Coca-Cola of the world, or are you talking the brand as the host, as a personal brand?
A little bit of both. So we do have host type brands, people who are, kind of social influencers, but we do partner with other brands. So we did a documentary with Mass Appeal, Nas's entertainment company, and Endeavor Audio, which is part of the WME family of, talent agency. And so we partnered with them on a documentary. So they're a brand, not necessarily a household name like Coca-Cola, though we do want to work with those kind of companies as well. And so there are some other podcast and video companies that do that. So yes, we definitely partner with both. And I think the mission still is the same. We talk to these partners, whether they be a host or a brand like a Coca-Cola, to say, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? First, what is success to you? And actually, I should have started with that. That is the first question we ask is, what is success? For some people, that is brand awareness. For some, it's, I want to drive traffic back to this other part of my business. And for others, it's, hey, I want to make money doing this exact thing. So I want to make money being a host. So I want to make ad money or licensing revenue.
Got it. That's interesting. So
that really technically is the first step.
Got it.
But yeah, as we get into the production of the shows, you were kind of asking, how has that evolution happen within the show?
Editorial meetings probably you have with all the team to kind of brainstorm ideas, I'm guessing.
Absolutely. And we see, as we do topics, we watch the analytics. We watch to see, okay, did this episode do better than another episode? Is that because of the topic? Was it because of how we marketed it that day? There's some ability for us to see how long people are watching or how long people are listening for. So that can also be a representation to us of, oh, wow, this episode was too long, or, hey, this topic ran out of gas after a certain point. So then that helps us to recalibrate as we move forward to say, all right, these are the type of topics that hit with our audience. Here's ones that aren't really working, so we should get away from it. And then that's how we then kind of pivot and make sure that we're flexible within the kind of topics we're touching on, the kind of guests that we're having on, and also how we're marketing these shows.
And speaking about the marketing part, as my audience is comprised of marketers and entrepreneurs, that some of them are actually producing their own content and visual stories. Can you speak about that? What type of marketing strategy are you using for your podcast and the video shows?
Sure, and I'll show you an example here in a second. I think we do a few different things. The first, honestly, that is the most effective that we've seen is when we're able to get our host onto other podcasts like this, or onto other video series, or just make sure that they're out there to have a voice to connect to that audience. There's nothing more powerful than to hear the host speaking on another show and you falling in love with their perspective, or whatever it is that they're presenting. Maybe you fall in love with a topic that they're talking about on that other show. So that's one of our biggest marketing tools. The other is obviously producing some kind of trailer for all this content. For each individual show, you want something that is going to be a 3-minute or less, minute and a half to say maybe 3 minutes of, okay, what are you going to get out of this show? What are some of the visual elements, some of the audio elements? And I'll play for you here a little piece of the first half of a trailer for the show Pick Last in Gym Class that I had mentioned earlier, with the Paralympian Lacey Henderson. And before I pull that up, just some things to kind of look out for, and I kind of brought this up before in terms of why I love her show, is that you'll notice in the first half, you'll get a lot of shots of her in her element as a Paralympian. So that really helps set the tone for who is she.
Yeah.
Why does she have the authority to speak on overcoming adversity? And then it gets into, okay, here's some clips of conversations. And when you'll also kind of notice in these clips is you may not even notice which leg is actually the amputee leg because of.
Yep.
My name is Lacey Henderson. I am a Paralympian. I am a sister. I'm a daughter. I'm a friend. I'm single. I'm a Gemini. And I am just a gal trying to figure out this world. I fall down on my face a lot, but I like to find lessons in it, and I like to laugh a lot. I think the human condition so much is about falling down and failing and struggling before we find that success. So many people can identify with that visceral fear that we all felt as children when we were waiting to get picked for whatever sport we were playing.
When I got asked to do this and it was called Pick Last in gym class, I was like, that's perfect for me because I always was.
I was always one of those kids that like tried like every sport and quit every sport, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'd be like, Mom, let me do basketball. And then like 2 days later, I quit.
Yeah.
Like, are you kidding me? I'm spoiled like you.
My whole point of being a comedian is like comedy through message. So people get the point across and let like people know that you can be yourself.
That's just a piece of our trailer there, but we really try to set the tone early of why is this person able to speak to me about these topics, and then allowing them to speak a little bit about the fact that okay, they're not only do they have this authority, but they're just like me. She's a daughter, she's a Gemini. Is all these different things that just make her a regular human being, and then give them a little bit of a taste of okay, this is what you're going to get out of this show.
No, I think you did a wonderful job there. I really liked how you set what I call Act One, the setting. Who this person is, and kind of establishing her big why you should pay attention, and then the transition to some of the interview clips that, as you said, give you some flavor or taste to what she's doing. And through all this, you can really see that she's doing a fantastic work in interviewing people and that handicap she has, it's not even, noticeable or naturally interfering with her, humanity and authenticity. This is great.
Yep. No, thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah. So I was thinking, since we're right now under the new normal, as that's the new term for.
I know. I'm trying to find a new term for it, but I always come back to the new normal.
Yeah, yeah, and it's kind of interesting, because when this period started early March, I found there was kind of evolution even in the term. We started calling it Corona, then it was coronavirus, and then it's COVID-19. And now it's the new normal. It's kind of an effort to kind of, push it away and kind of bring it, add on it new labels. So I'm kind of curious, as a visual storyteller yourself, how are you kind of reprogramming your content these days to kind of address the challenges of these underrepresented voices that you're so much focusing on?
Yeah, in a few different ways, because we did get hit, and actually kind of hit in a good way. We were about to purchase a studio right before all this happened. And so we were going to actually have an in-house space for all of our New York-based content, which was going to allow us to have consistent video, because we do have some projects that are just currently podcasts, and we want to make those podcast and video podcasts, much like you have here. And so that put a little bit of a hindrance there. But what we did to combat that was, all right, well, we can't be in the same room together, but we have things just like this where we can use Zoom to connect our hosts. And I think that's where we've really found a way to tell even more authentic stories now, or at least present them in more authentic ways, because now our guests are literally in their own home. And it really does break down that barrier even more so than in the past of they're just like me. They're struggling just like me. They're in their basement just like me. They have their kids screaming in the background during their meeting just like me.
Exactly.
And I think, from a topic standpoint, we've shifted some of our shows where I'll use the instance of a show, PM Mood. So PM Mood is one of our podcast series that we're switching over into video that was kind of affected by this, but their topics and guests are usually based around having on somebody who is a change maker or an entertainer, somebody who's using their voice as an authority, as an influencer, as a celebrity to enact some kind of social change, to use it for philanthropy, activism. And so with coronavirus now, or COVID-19, or the new normal, we've now shifted those conversations and those guests into being more people who are able to give perspectives on how to live life in this new normal. And so we've changed our topics a bit, we've changed our guests a bit, and we've changed how we present the show. And I can show you an example of this here from the show PM Mood. This actually was recorded just recently, and it was our host's first time using Zoom. So her technological prowess is not the best. Yep. Our guest, Donnell Rawlings, a comedian, he put up one of these virtual backgrounds, and he started fading in and out of it. So visually, it's not as stunning as what you just saw with Pick Last and Gym Class, where we have all these 4K cameras. Right. But I think the authenticity of what comes through is great. And if you listen in, you can actually hear his kid yelling in the background. And there's another point that I don't have in this video where his kid actually pops into the video at one point.
I see. Wow. Love it.
So yeah, let me pull this up for you here. But the part of why I selected this clip, you'll kind of hear them talk about coronavirus and this new normal, especially from the perspective of a stand-up comedian.
When things like this happen, some people come out winning in a situation like this.
Yep.
Some people say, okay, I figured it out. Some people I know I've been a good stand-up comic for most part of my career. So I didn't have to force myself to be a good entrepreneur. Anybody say they're an entrepreneur. You get your first business card, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm the CEO of nothing. You know what I'm saying? But now,
so you've seen my older business cards.
No. I remember when I got my first business card, I put vice president, share owner. I put all type, and I couldn't wait to give out them goddamn business cards.
Yeah.
But now it's like, and I've always had a entrepreneur spirit, but never was forced to exercise it like with the sense of urgency that I have right now. And it's not desperate. It's like this, you could do this, but you haven't been doing it because you've been lucky enough to have a full calendar. Like, right. I've had a full calendar,
So there you can see just a clip of, it's nothing visually stunning, but it helps you feel like, wow, I see Donnell Rawlings on the Chappelle Show. I've seen him on stand-up comedy specials. I see Danielle Moody Mills on MSNBC. And it's like, I see them looking just like I do right now, actually, without the hair and makeup and all that. And so it just cuts through to some of these entertainers that you may already love. In a way that you couldn't have done if we were in studio.
Yeah, and you see it also in the mainstream media. Trevor Noah, doing his show at his home, and it's kind of interesting. You kind of peeking into his bookshelf where he's reading. Yeah. So it's really intrusive, and I think this, as you said, it's a great opportunity for you to maybe not intentionally, but at least throw it to your host if there's a way they can stage their background in a way that could trigger a conversation. You're wondering what is this little object behind me. So this is the backstory. So it's another, because every object you see has some subjective meaning or backstories behind it. And if you can use that as a prop, which is organically coming from your natural habitat, so to speak, then it's adding to the richness of your visual story. Hey, now I really get this guy because I had the same object in my room or whatever it is. So, so that's interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Another thing that related to this new normal, what do you see, like when you work with brands, do you have any kind of advice you give them of what type of stories they should communicate this time?
Yeah, I think the main advice is making sure that you're being, I'm trying to choose the right word, but being responsible, I think. And responsibility is making sure that you have all the knowledge before jumping into a certain topic or trying to reach a certain audience. And I say that because I think that sometimes brands can mean very well, especially if they're bigger brands. They can be very well intentioned, but if they are not speaking directly with the community that they're trying to engage, or they don't employ the community that they're trying to engage, they can come across as insensitive or even harmful, especially if you're talking around something like mental health and you're giving out, bad advice. You can potentially harm people. And so I think to be responsible in how you're educating yourself before you jump into that topic, and making sure that you're employing the right kind of people that know how to present those topics to that audience, so they don't feel like they're being talked at, and they're being talked with, and being given competent information that's easy for them to digest.
Yeah, and especially avoid, kind of profit mongering or, product first.
Yes.
Right now, it's really going to backfire. So, yeah. One thing I want to talk about also, any great story sometimes, unfortunately, any conflict is a good to drive the story forward, right? So I'm kind of curious what type of failures you came across as you were producing these shows that you kind of learn from.
Yeah, I think we've made a lot of mistakes, especially, we've only been public facing. We've only been putting out content out there since March of 2019. So we're really only a year old. But in that first year, we learned a lot of things. And one of the mistakes that we made was one that was based out of our excitement. Pick, Last, and Gym Class, the show I showed you earlier with Lacey Henderson. We had signed that deal probably about a month before South by Southwest. And she was at the time training in Austin. And so we're like, okay, hey, we're going to have a wealth of celebrities that are coming through the Austin area. We can't miss this opportunity to get all these great potential guests. And we did. We got a lot of great guests out of South by Southwest. But the problem is that we didn't give enough time for real pre-production. Right. So, we had all these great intentions of things that we wanted to do, from not only the topics that we wanted to cover, but also how we wanted to shoot the content. Like, we had this idea of having Lacey and the guests do some kind of physical activity together, just to add a fun little element to it, which is something that we may still do in future seasons. But in this first season, it happened so quickly that by the time, we booked these guests, we found that some of them, because some were also disabled, they had physical limitations to do the kind of activities that we were thinking about. And so we had to basically scrap that entire idea. And so there was a major element that was going to help us from a visual perspective that we no longer had. And even just from a preparation standpoint, in terms of trying to gather all the research, giving our host enough time to be able to prep, she did an amazing job as a host, and you could never tell when you watch these shows. But I think we could have done a better job preparing her, and also a better job creating better visual elements, all because we rushed into the project because we wanted to get these big names that could add a PR element to what we were doing. And so we picked the trade-off that I think we probably shouldn't have in hindsight. And so I think we're going to be better in future seasons. But the lesson that we definitely learned out of that is you really have to weigh the risk-reward analysis of rushing into a season. Usually rushing into a season is gonna get you it's gonna get you I'm trying to think of the right word, but not as good results as you would have intended to. Yeah, because you need to have the proper timeline to actually develop each step of the production process. Absolutely. And on top of that, one other thing I forgot to mention too is that we picked locations, kind of last minute, because we just had to grab what was ever available, especially during a major event like South by Southwest, where everything's booked up months in advance. So we ended up in locations that weren't the best sound quality type locations, or I think one space we booked it in an art gallery, and we don't have license for that art material, so we can't show that video content because we don't have rights to the nice images that we have in the background. Luckily, I shot this, so I have all rights to that. It looks gorgeous. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. So now that you've been producing several great shows for a couple of years now, any kind of proudest emotional moment that stand out? Yeah, I think one of my proudest is one of the first shows that we ever started production on, a show called Inner Space. It's all about mental and emotional well-being. As I mentioned at the beginning of all this, I grew up with a lot of different kinds of trauma, as many of us have. And I think all of us have been affected, whether it be personally or a loved one that's around us, by some kind of mental health situation, whether they be very acute, like a schizophrenia or a bipolar disorder, or whether it be something like anxiety or depression. And so, going into that show, it was very emotional, just even kind of trying to touch on those topics. But I think from an internal standpoint, we had a couple trips around the country where we shot in LA or New York, and we even went outside the country to London for a few days. And we had our team out there. And when you're covering this kind of topic day in, day out, it helps to reveal things internally to our own team of things that we need to take care of personally, and even as a company, how we treat our employees and how we constitute sick days now around not only physical ailments, but also mental and emotional ailments. So I think that show was very instrumental for us, not only as a show, but also as a company, as individuals. And we did that as both a video and audio podcast series, where we touched on, each episode was on a different element of mental health. So mental health in the entertainment industry or in the fashion industry, an episode all around PTSD and trauma, how this affects our veterans. And so every episode really had a specific focus. And one of the more popular episodes was one where we had Wayne Brady on as a guest. And I just literally, I think it was a couple days ago, got this message when someone left a comment, and it really made me smile, just for me to read it real quick. It says, "I've just learned I'm not alone with depression, no matter what walk of life, rich and famous or regular non-famous person." I think, that's exactly what we were trying to go for. We had a mix of celebrities, we had a mix of everyday people, business people, and we want to showcase that no one is any different than anybody else. These major celebrities are going through these same situations. And just like we were talking about with representation for people with disabilities, I think from a mental health standpoint, that's just as important, if not more important, that we all can feel like I'm not the only one. And so it may encourage you when you see a celebrity talking openly about it. Now you are more inclined to talk openly about it. And hopefully also find care for yourself, or also recognize it in other people that you can then try to help find them care. So that's one where I continually, from week to week, see these messages, and it makes me smile that we accomplished what we wanted to.
Yeah, I love this example because, that's what I keep saying, that, a great visual story that engage people is nothing but a mirroring exercise. The ability for your audience to see themselves in your story. That's happened to me. I can relate to this. That's where the magic happens. And no, this is exciting to see that you're coming across that from your shows. So now that we reach kind of the final segment of our show, can you just give us your kind of top 3 tips of what would you recommend people when they think about creating compelling visual stories?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different things that go into it, but I'd say my top 3 would be figure out your niche. I think especially when it comes to digital content, that is where the industry is pushed towards, and I think that's a good thing. Figure out not only who is the audience you want to speak to, but probably before you even do that, figure out who you are. What is your voice? What are your perspectives? What do you bring to the table that nobody else brings? Yes, what is your passion? I think audiences can definitely feel that, especially in this digital platform where people are picking and choosing what they're watching. They're not just turning on TV and watching NBC for the next 3 hours. So I think you have to specifically know what your voice is and who it is you're trying to reach. Sorry, I just need to pull this up because I made a note to myself here because there was something I didn't want to forget. Oh, that's what I didn't want to forget. I think the other is less is more. I think, people look at, and I'll use the podcast industry as a instance here. People look at Tim Ferriss or Joe Rogan, who do these podcasts that are like 2 hours long, and they're super successful. They do millions and millions of downloads. And I think they get caught up in, oh, wow, I can host a 2-hour show. Usually 2 hours is way too long. One, people don't have that kind of time to sit and just listen to something for that period of time or watch for that period of time. But also, usually you're regurgitating the same information at a certain point. You're wearing your audience out. We always like to talk in the industry as, leave them wanting more. And I think that's really important. Try to figure out how to get your message across as quickly as possible, in obviously an understandable way. And then, leave the audience pandering you to, hey, you should do another hour, or hey, I need more. You want your audience asking you for more, as opposed to them saying, man, that show was too long, or you need to cut this down a bit.
Yeah, no, I love it. Yeah, and speaking about the audience want more, so if our audience that are currently listening or watching this episode, they want to contact you with questions, how can they do that?
Yeah, I'll give it 1 second. Just the last one for what they can do is also we like conversations over interviews. I think the way you present it in a very conversational way, as opposed to, all right, I'm going to get from this question to this question to this question. No, follow the flow of the conversation, much like, you do a great job of here.
Appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah. And for us, I think if you want to follow us, our social media handle is the same across all platforms: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We are at DCP Official. So D as in David, C as in Charlie, P as in Paul, Official. I personally am only on Instagram, Chris Colbert Report, but I'm much less fun to follow than at DCP Official.
Cool. Thank you so much, Chris. This has been a lot of fun. I really learned a lot today, and I'm really looking forward to staying in touch. And for all of you listening or watching, stay tuned to our next episode of Visual Storytelling Today. And until next time, I hope everybody stay safe and keep producing great stories. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.